Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Are you glad it's Friday?
Always.
Means nothing to a realtor, but
Clearly.
it's nice to say, oh, it's Friday.
Indeed.
Oh, mercy. I don't have internet again today. So I'm scabbing off of the upstairs mortgage company's guest internet. I think it'll stay up this time though, because theirs is pretty good. I use it all the time because ours goes in and out. So EPD's coming next Friday. Yay! We're supposed to have the fastest internet in the world here in Chattanooga, but you have to pay for it, that's for sure. If I wanted to get the gig, and they've got one faster than just the gig, but if I wanted to get the most popular, it would be $500 a month to have the gig here in Chattanooga. We don't need
Holy
that.
cow.
Yeah, we don't need that. Right now, we have 100 megabytes. And that works okay as long as the wireless router works. Our problem is our router, so they're coming and installing a new router. Or at least we think that's what it is. And that 100,
Ours is right at $100.
is it? That 100
Mhm.
megabytes is, well, it's $60, and now with the new router, it'll add $17 to that, so it'll be $77. I could go up to 200 and it would be $100 a month plus the $17 for the router. And we'd had our own router down here before I even came, and it's an old Spectrum router. And EPD, when they came out to look at it, they said this is probably the problem on the Spectrum. All right, so it's about that time. Let's see if I am going to be able to share the screen with you. It looks like I am. I have you guys over here on another monitor so I can see you, and then I've got the PowerPoint here. You guys have your form?
Mhm.
Okie dokie, okie dokie. Let's see. The thing about this, let me see, can I get rid of my cheat sheet? I don't need my cheat sheet when I'm doing this. All right, so we're going to start with, I think I was right. It's sections 1 and 3 this week, right?
Correct.
I'm telling you what, this will be the third time I've taught forms this week, so I may think I've told you something in the hat, and so I'm going to be very careful. So when we're talking about section 1, we get to the purchase and sale agreement, and we have basically section 1 is going to be describing who's purchasing and what they're purchasing, okay? So I will tell you that 3.5 weeks ago, I received 2 offers from 2 Keller Williams agents, and neither one of them had filled in the seller's name on line 4. So, and one of them, the seller was just wanting to accept, and we had to counter offer it to get that information into the offer so that it would be correct, because without somebody's name, either a buyer or a seller, it's void because you don't have a contract. So that is something that we have to remember, that we always need to put the full legal names of buyers and sellers. And if we're not representing the seller, sometimes that's, hard to get your hands on because you might have to be dealing with an estate or, there's things, right? So it's always good to check the confirmation of agency, check the property condition disclosure or exemption, and then check that against the tax records and see if the sellers, especially when you're writing up the offer, you will know the buyers, right? But as far as the sellers' names go, so it's extremely important that you put legal, people's legal names on lines 3 and 4. I truly never thought in all my years in real estate that I would have to teach people to put the people involved in the form, in the contract, in the offers, names on it. But we're having to now. And I had heard people say that they weren't doing it, and I'll be doggone. And you know what I did? I actually emailed the broker and said, because they were both from the same office. And I said, you know, if I was the broker, I would want to know my agents were doing this. And I want you to know I've gotten two offers from this, one from this agent, one from the other agent, and neither one of them filled that in. So, of course, I didn't hear back from him on that. I've heard back from him on some other things, but he and I are, you know, friendly and friends to each other. But I would want somebody to pick up the phone and call me if, you know, if one agent's doing it. You know, I might be able to think, well, did they just skip that? No, they didn't just skip that, you know. So make sure you put those names. And, you know, it's really important, too, to, like I said earlier, put the legal names, especially for your buyers. You know, you might be working with Joe and Sandy Kraft, and their names are really Joseph and Sandra. So go ahead and write out Joseph and Sandra. When you go to closings already, the title company has the buyers sign, yeah, these are the other ways that my name is out there, you know, and otherwise known as, or also known as, AKA form. They have to sign that, and that's because things are out there in different ways. So the title company will kind of pick up that slack there for us a little bit if we don't necessarily put the full legal name, but it's good to work it that way. And then you get into the address of the property. And, you know, we learned in pre-licensing school that the street address is just one way to identify a property. And so we do enter the street address here at line 6 and 7, street, city, state, Tennessee's printed on there, and then the zip code, and then, of course, the county. And then we're asked to enter the deed book and page number. Now, a lot of folks are auto-populating their listings from the courthouse retrieval tax records, and hopefully everything is going to come over correctly. If they're not auto-populating their listing forms using the courthouse retrieval system, then, and in dot loop, we can't do that. I'm sorry, but if they use transaction desks, they can do that. So, we always want to check these deed book and page numbers by going into the tax records ourselves to make sure they're right. Okay, because I mean everybody's human. If they're typing them in, you can type them backwards. I actually do that. I mean, you know, sometimes I may be thinking 457 and it's 547. Those are the kind of things. They're just mistakes people made, but we want to check and make sure things are right. Then we get to line 9 where it says and/or blank instrument number. I want you to know that an instrument number is not the tax ID number, okay? That is not what it is. You will see I went into courthouse retrieval and I pulled up a listing and I got and cut out, snipped it out of the screen, and this number right here is the instrument number. Okay, this is the instrument number, and it's usually found at the same place you'll find a deed book and page number. Now, they call it a document number, but document number and instrument number are the same thing, okay? And not all properties track by that. So not all properties that you list will have that. But when you are looking to sell it, when you pull up tax records for the property you're writing the offer on, which, by the way, you should do, you know, that's just one thing you should look at, again, to verify maybe the seller's name and the deed book and page number. You may see this instrument number here. And if it has one, you would enter it right here on line number 9. If it doesn't have one, you would just put NA there. But the blank there for instrument number, that is not the tax ID number, which is the map, group, and parcel number. That's what a tax ID number is.
Susan,
Uh-huh.
what are you calling the courthouse retrieval system?
CRS, the tax record system that we use
Okay.
in MLS.
Oh, okay. So just the tax record?
Do you go to the public tax records at the county government's website, or do you use it through the MLS?
I use it through the MLS.
And are you in Knoxville or River counties?
Knoxville.
I believe Knoxville uses CRS, Courthouse Retrieval System, CRS. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because River counties does, Knoxville does, and Chattanooga does. So This is where I got that from. I just snipped it out of a page. And so you got to make sure that this information is correct. Now, on line number 10, the recommendation from the Tennessee Realtors is that line number 10 is where you would put the tax ID number, the lot number, and the subdivision, okay? If it's not in a subdivision, which a lot of, I mean, we deal more with rural property than, there are sections of the state that do that, and we're one of those. So we may have a tax ID number and no lot number and no subdivision, and we may have a tax ID number with 1.57 acres plus or minus, right? So you could put the tax ID number, and it's a good idea to put the approximate acreage on that line, because the title company can look at that and see that we're selling a property that has acres. Now, let me tell you why that's important. I sold a piece of property in McMinn County 4 or 5 years ago, and I had written the tax ID number there, and I had written with 11 point, I don't remember, I'm going to make something up, 11.52 acres plus or minus. And when they went to the actual deed, when the title company went to the deed and pulled the legal description, I don't know if you know this or not, but they have a program that they put that legal description in, and it will draw the lot. Okay, it will draw it. And when they put the legal description in off the deed, it only drew a little bit over 2 acres. And so they called me and they said, "Are you sure that's 11 acres?" I said, "Yes." And so we had a problem. So this was probably 2017 or so, and we were just coming out of all those foreclosures. And just so you know, back then, there were title company on every corner. Everybody was in the real estate business in some shape, form, or fashion. And when the bottom fell out, a lot of these places closed. So what had happened with this is, it was supposed to be 11 something acres, but they had left off part of the legal description in the deed. And so only 2 and something acres had actually transferred. So we had to try to find who closed it, which we knew who closed it, but they had closed down. They were no longer in business. So you guys probably know Sandy Phillips out of Athens, right? She is the one who had the property listed when my folks bought it and then turned around and was selling it. So I called her and I said, "Do you have any way of getting in touch with the seller of that property, because we're now trying to sell it and they're saying that they don't own but 2 point something acres." And she said, "Oh no, it's 11 point whatever acres." And I said, "Well, yes, we know that, because the truth of the matter, what they mapped out went right through the middle of a big carport shed thing they had built to put their camper under. So it didn't even include all that if you looked at what they currently had." And so we had to get in touch with the lady in Florida, and bless her heart, she was an elderly lady, and she thought we were trying to scam her, and so she wouldn't talk to me. So Sandy called her, and Sandy told her what was going on and told her the title company was closed. And we went back, and she had to go to a title company in Florida, and with her old deed. Thank goodness she still had it. We had a copy of it, but she, again, thought we were scamming her. And we had to go through a big ordeal to get that fixed, 4, 5, 6, 7 years after these people had bought this. So it was a big ordeal. So it's good to put there on line number 10, if you have acres, the tax ID number and what the approximate acreage is supposed to be. Now, if you're selling a condo, now in Cleveland, there's not many condos. There's quite a few condos in Chattanooga. Knoxville has condos. And I didn't put this anywhere on this slide, but if you are selling a condo, you can make a note on your form. You need to look at the form RF 501, which is a condominium legal exhibit. Okay? Now, if I list the condo, I have the seller go ahead and fill out that condominium legal exhibit, because its description is different than just a stick-built house's legal description. And that's the only true legal description form that we have that we might need to use, because condos are so different. And if it's a condo, you can write there on line number 10 to see the RF 501 condominium legal exhibit, because it's just different, okay, when you're selling a condo. And while I'm talking about condos, there is another form that you should always use if you're selling a condo and representing the buyer, and that is the RF 709 request for condominium. I think it's condominium association information. Okay, because we at the forms committee we had to create that form because there was just so much stuff going on. People would buy in a condo in a condo complex, and the association would not even be solvent. It might need a new roof. They couldn't replace the roof. They couldn't make repairs that to the common areas and things like that they were supposed to make. So Tennessee passed a law a few years ago that the buyers of condos have the right to request this information, and the association must supply them with that information. And if they don't, they're fined. And it lists how much that fine is in that form. When you request it, they have 10 days to deliver it, and if they don't, then they're fined $250, and the title company collects that at closing. And so if they don't send it in that first 10 days, it's $250. And if they don't send it within the next 10 days, which is 20 days into a transaction, then it's a $500 fine. So when you're selling a condo, there's some, lots of caveats around selling a condo, but that's one thing that you might want to make note of there, because I know some of us, like in Cleveland, there might be 3 condo complexes, maybe. I don't even know if there's 100 condos in Cleveland. But in Chattanooga there's a bunch. So any questions on any of that, on filling that out or anything? It's pretty simple. Once you do it, it's pretty simple. Then we get into the craziness, and that is the pre-printed stuff that's going to stay, okay? And every year that I was on the forms committee, we had to address issues surrounding these lines 12 through 27, because real estate agents, of course, we want things to be done as easily as possible to where we don't have to do a whole lot of extra work, if you will. But we need to know what's here. And this same list of information and remain or not remain with the property, this is on your listing agreement. So if you're on the listing side, you need to go over this very specifically with the seller and make it very clear what remains and what does not remain. I'm going to tell you about a few of the problems that we've seen, and most recently is the fact that security systems, okay? When it says up here on line 16, all security system components and controls, sellers seem not to understand that a Ring doorbell or the Ring exterior lighting that they have that records video, that is part of a security system. So when you're listing a property, you need to make sure and help them understand that has to stay. If it's not going to stay, then they need to take it down right now. And most of them don't want to because they want it. So they might say, well, I'll take it down before we close, and then you would have to list that as items that will not remain with the property. And if you're listing property and you do that, you need to put that in the MLS so me, as the buyer's agent, can come in and see what you're telling me is not going to remain with the property. And then I can add that here, or maybe the buyer wants to ask for it to remain, and we could ask for it to remain. Just because the seller says it's not going to remain doesn't mean the buyer can't ask for it. There is no way in the world the forms committee could put a all-inclusive list of stuff of what's going to be included in the property. And that's where we come into play as the real estate licensees. We have to manage perception versus reality when it comes to these things, okay? We have to be able to explain all these things to the buyers and to the sellers. But a lot of people will take this very literally and understand what it means, and others are trying to get around it. So you're the one that has to help with this. So we have to explain this, and of course it says if present. So if it's there when they look at the house, unless the MLS says something's not going to remain, then they should expect it to be there when they close. Okay, any questions about that at all? So there's a lot of things listed here. Another big issue is all window treatments and hardware. That's a big issue. We've had issues right here where it says range. So that's, any stove or range or anything built in or not built in. But a range is something that has to stay with the property in most instances. And we have had sellers switch those out. They may have a big, nice Gemini or Viking range, something that's a high dollar range, and they may take that out and put a lower cost range in there. So what I want to show you next is I want to show you some example language to use when you go in and you're showing this property. If your buyer is very excited about a specific item, then you need to make sure, and in this section here's where you say it's going to remain, you need to describe that, okay? I don't worry too much about, gas logs and, fireplace doors and attached screens. I mean, I've not seen too many people switch that stuff out, okay? But I have seen them and been heard of on the forms committee of them switching out window treatments and things like that. And even if you just write the word refrigerator here, they'll switch out the refrigerator that's currently in the property and just put a refrigerator in. Could it be done with any of this stuff? Absolutely it could, but most of the times it's the larger priced items, if you will, the higher priced items. So being the agent that's showing the property, you've got to get in there and write out specifics. So here's some specific language for you. If you're going to ask for the refrigerator, don't just say refrigerator, okay? You need to describe that refrigerator. You need to be specific. Stainless steel side-by-side refrigerator model, Samsung Super Cool, okay? And you may have to say in the kitchen, because if they've got a refrigerator in the kitchen, then they got a beer fridge in the garage. Maybe the buyer wants that one too, so you may have to describe 2 refrigerators. Now, a lot of people will say or ask the question, should I put the serial number? The answer to that is no, because if you put the serial number of that specific refrigerator, if that quits working between contract and closing, you're going to get a non-working refrigerator. But if you just put the model in there and the color and that it's side by side or whatever, then that's what needs to be in there when you close. A working one, because it was working when you looked at it. When you're talking about curtains, the truth of the matter is you have to get into a pretty high price point to have custom curtains most of the time. I don't know, everything's high now. Maybe it's in, who knows. But if, let's say, the buyer is like, I absolutely love those custom draperies, maybe they have cornices and just other things that are just really nice. Even though it says over here that this window treatments include shutters, blinds, shades, curtains, and draperies, you want to make sure that that buyer is going to get what they want. Okay, so you might need to say custom gold velvet living room drapery, including custom cornices and all hardware. I can tell you right now, Forms Committee had an issue that was brought before them over some custom gold velvet brocaded draperies. Okay, so people will argue over anything. You being a real estate agent that's with them in the house, only you're going to know how to describe what it is they want. Water features. I had somebody dig up a fish pond. Okay, they didn't dig it up, they just took it up because, they had dug the hole and put the plastic and put the stack stone around and had a little waterfall and had plants all in there, had some koi fish in there, and they took it with them. And we had a big hole in the
Well,
yard.
Serena had to buy her client a refrigerator one time because of that exact same thing.
It
She
is.
just said refrigerator, and they put one out of the garage in the house, and so she ended up having to buy her clients a new refrigerator.
I bought a refrigerator one time. That's buying a refrigerator is what made me get so involved with the forms and the forms committee, because I said I'm not buying anybody else a refrigerator except for Susan and Terry, because I work hard for my money. Okay, But when this water feature went missing, I mean, that's out in the yard in the landscaping, right? So sometimes you think all this landscaping is going to stay because it looks like it's all landscaping, but maybe not, okay? Um, so I've learned that if there's a water feature, a pond or whatever, I write something like water feature in the front of the house or the back of the house, wherever it is, to include any fish and plants currently in the feature. Also, the bird bath. I had someone take a big bird bath fountain. You walked up to the house, and the sidewalk went around this whole big bird bath thing. And when we went to do our final walkthrough, the bird bath was gone. All the monkey grass was around it, but the bird bath was gone. So I've learned that you need to be specific about landscaping for sure. Okay, well, everything, but landscaping. And what does the buyer see as landscaping? Because if you go back over here, let me even go back one. Landscaping is mentioned on line 11, and it's mentioned again here on line 18. So it says all landscaping and all outdoor lighting. So perception versus reality, what is landscaping? So you and the buyer are going to have to talk about this when it comes to being specific about the things that you're going to put on the purchase and sale agreement. And I will tell you right now that the real estate agent is usually the one that ends up fixing anything that goes wrong right here. It ends up coming out of the real estate agent's pocket. So that's why it's super important that you're very specific. And that's on the purchase side. Now let me bump over to the list side again, because this is also in the listing agreement. So you have to talk with this about sellers. Now you guys, you know why I teach this, and I do this when I list and when I am working with a buyer. So one time in a final walkthrough, the real estate agent called me and said the mailbox was sitting on the bar in the kitchen. I was like, okay, that's, my mind is going, why? So I called the seller, and this is what he said to me. He said, Susan, you don't know your forms as well as you think you do. I'm like, I wanted to smack him, but he said, if you'll look at, and it was probably a different line number then, but look here on line 18. It says mailbox or mailboxes. It doesn't say anything about the post. Okay? So the post was a well pump from his grandmother's farm, and he wanted to take it with him. And he says, I know I told you that when we were listing the house, and I know he didn't, because I had 1,700 notes of stuff he had told me. I mean, he moved a doggone 4-ton rock. He was moving from Cleveland to Knoxville, and he put that 4-ton rock right up in that moving truck and took it with him. Okay? I mean, he even had a little sign made that said, this rock will not convey with the property, and had it stuck in the ground out by the rock. So this is how literal some people will take it. And he was right. I never in my lifetime thought somebody would take a mailbox post. And thank goodness the buyers didn't remember that it was a well pump. And here's what I did. I called the agent back. They were still at the house doing the final walkthrough, and I said, hey, what are you guys doing after the final walkthrough? Could you meet me at Lowe's? They said yes. We went over to the aisle at Lowe's that has the mailboxes and the post and the decorative numbers and the reflectors, and we walked out of there probably with $200 worth of stuff, because I wanted them to have decorative numbers for the box and for their house. I just wanted them to feel whole, because if they ever remembered that was a well pump and thought, oh, I really wanted that, then, it would have been a problem. But they didn't. They were very happy with what we were doing. So being specific is very important in this area, okay? All right. Leased items. Leased items are as important. I will tell you, let me back up here for a second. You see right up here where it says on line 13, and plumbing fixtures and equipment? You see that? And then I'm going to come back over here to leased items where it says some examples are water softener systems. Now, that language is there because in one of my other lives as a broker, 2 of my agents had to split the cost of a water softener because they weren't clear. One of them was the listing agent and one of them was the selling agent, and neither one was clear in their contract, either the listing agreement or the purchase and sale. And the seller said it was not a plumbing fixture because it had one. I don't know a lot about plumbing, but supposedly it was one of those quick release connections. All you had to do was turn the water off and pull it back and unhook it, and it was gone. Well, the listing agent assumed it was a plumbing fixture, and I would have. I'm going to be honest, I would have too. Um, but the seller didn't think so. And the buyer and the buyer's agent assumed it was a plumbing fixture, but the seller didn't. So that's what I'm talking about. On either side, you got to manage perception versus reality. So remember, water softeners can be leased also. Here's something else that's not on here that I didn't know could be leased, and they might not be able to be leased anymore. But when the hot water tanks came out, the instant hot water tanks, some builders would lease those for 1 year, and then the buyer would have to take over the lease of that or purchase it. Okay, so I didn't know that, and it happened. I mean, I lost $500,000. They bought a $500,000 house back in probably 2003, and I lost that customer because that seller didn't tell us that. And when the year lease was up, they said somebody knocked on their front door and was there to get the tankless water heater. And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I called the builder, and he said, "Oh yeah, I rented that." I'm like, "What do you mean you rented that? You didn't tell." They've been living there a year. Okay. Well, he come over then, and he went ahead and paid for it because I told him, I said, "You got to pay for this. I'm not paying for this. We don't have a single thing in writing where you disclose that." So he did, but they were so angry. I lost them as a customer because they thought it was my fault that I didn't know this. Okay. So I'm not going to argue with them. It's just what they do, and so you've got to look for what's leased because on the property condition disclosure, I have pulled up the line numbers on there. It's line 163 through 167. The seller is supposed to put on there what's leased, but in a new construction, they don't fill out this form. They fill out an exemption, so you don't have that. So on a property condition disclosure, it will say, is any system or equipment or part of the property being leased? Yes, no, or unknown. And if it's yes, they got to put what it is. So you need to be looking at that with your buyer and discussing with them, do they want to assume those leases or not? And so whatever's leased, whatever's written on the property condition disclosure, you need to write in here that those items are leased. And I'm going to tell you why. That's to protect you in case they're gone. Especially if the buyer says, no, I don't want to assume the leases, and you check this box and you write them here, and then the buyer gets over there and go, well, heck, I don't have any heat because I don't have a propane tank. Okay. So, or, I can't run my stove or my dryer or whatever. So make sure that you check this on the property condition disclosure and then fill that out on your offer and talk to the buyer about it. Now, I do know with propane tanks, a lot of the places that people are using out of the Cleveland market, they would rather just come get the tank and let the buyer start their own lease all over again. We've found that to be what they want to do. So we've got to try to choreograph that at closing. If it's the summertime and it's only used for heat or maybe a gas log fireplace, it's not a big deal. But in the wintertime, we have to really try to choreograph that and get that taken care of. Also, some propane tanks are buried, and most of the time when they're buried, they own them, so they're not leased. Okay, so do ask sellers about that, especially if they say that they heat by propane, but they don't put anything here under the leased items when you're listing and you're looking over the property condition disclosure. And please do that. I know, we're not supposed to write on it. We're not supposed to fill it out for anybody, but we can look at it to make sure they don't skip any questions, that they've answered every question and things like that. And so that property condition disclosure, you should be talking to sellers about and buyers. Now, here's something that you need to know. This green book right here, okay, this Manual of Tennessee Real Estate, this is the 2020 version. However, it is the most current version. So in this book, it says under the property conveyance law in the state of Tennessee, it's not necessarily just the realtor law. It is an actual statute of the state, and it has its title of property conveyance. and it says that buyers should see and accept the property condition disclosure, and that would now include the exemption because of those 6 questions that are on the exemption. No seller of real estate property are exempt from answering those 6 questions prior to the acceptance of a contract. Okay, which means when you are audited in your office, when your office is audited, the TREC auditors will check the acceptance date, and they'll then check the date the property condition disclosure or exemption was signed. If it's after the exception date, the firm can get fined for that. Okay, so you got to make sure it can be the same day as the acceptance date, but not after. So you got to make sure that stuff all works together. That's kind of a side thing there. Sorry, went down the rabbit trail. But leased items, you've got to make sure that you know what they are. Oops, I got skipped something. And then talking about fuel and leased items, line 36 of the purchase and sale agreement gets ignored a lot of times. And I'm going to tell you, I wrote a $350-something check myself because it was skipped at closing, and a week or so after closing, the seller's agent called me and said, you know, the seller and I were just looking over this, and they didn't get credit for the propane gas at closing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I just assumed the title company would take care of it, but they didn't. Okay, so the fuel is not included in the purchase price unless you change this in special stipulations. Okay, the fuel is supposed to be adjusted and charged to the buyer and credited to the seller at closing at current market prices. Okay, so we've got to make sure this is happening. And I know up in the Bradley County area, where when I sell up there, there's a lot of propane tanks. A lot of people have propane tanks. Okay, so I have to really monitor for this. And if I represent the seller, I tell the seller when we go under contract, hey, you know, 7 days before closing, you're going to have to get the propane company out there, and they're going to have to tell you how much propane's in the tank and what it would currently cost in today's market. And we're going to have them write up an invoice so that we can send that to the title company, because they got to charge that to the buyer. Now, if you want it included in the purchase price, you just go over to special stipulations and you write line 36, fuel, included in the purchase price. Okay, line 36, fuel, colon, included in the purchase price. Okay, and that way you don't have to do any of this stuff. So you can do it either way. Any questions on that? All right, I don't even know what time it is. It's like 10:35. We're good. We're good. So let's talk about earnest money. So earnest money. Oh, earnest money, earnest money. Earnest money is not required in the state of Tennessee to have a valid contract. So somebody doesn't have to put earnest money down. It shows their good faith, their good intentions. I used to explain it to buyers a long time ago. This is your layaway money, okay? Which means you're going to come back and get your item, the house, all right? So, but it's not required. Now, back in the day, because I've been around a while, and I know people hate to hear people say, back in my day, but back in my early days as a realtor, I've taken a boat, I've taken a ring, and I had a friend who took a dabbling talking parrot that drove us crazy in our office for a month and a half and made a god-awful mess because we had to leave it up in the front of the office. And I'll never forget my broker. Every day he'd come in and he would say a bad word. He would say, D-A-M-N, bird, you know, but we had to keep it alive. And he was like, nobody touch it. Don't get around it. Don't burn candles in here. Don't do anything. We got to keep this bird alive, because that's what, oh my Lord, help us all. So anyway, it was crazy. But now we want money, right? But we don't want cash. We don't want cash. Now, I'm going to tell you, again, back in my day, I have copied money, which is a federal offense, just so you know. But it has been in the past that, you know, to prove you have somebody's earnest money, if you took cash, I know Susan Ledford in the Cleveland office, her and I laugh about this all the time because y'all might not know this, but Susan and I used to be a team. We were a team in the 90s when nobody was a team, right? Except husband and wives, maybe. But we didn't use the word teams. We were just husband and wife. But Susan and I were a team. We called ourselves Team Susan. I could tell you some stories. But her and I just laugh all the time about the stupid stuff we used to do. But we used to make copies of cash, okay? But don't take cash now. Take a check of some kind or a money order, and the buyer has paid or will pay within so many days. The best practice is to get that check when you write the offer, okay? But I know that we got a lot of buyers that are coming from other locations and they're not sitting down with you to write the offer. You're doing it, through dot loop and such. So they may have to drop it off or whatever. So it's my opinion, and that's all it is my opinion, that you should never put more than 5 days here. That buyer needs to be able to get that earnest money to you within 5 days. Because you put an extended time out there and they could go home and have buyer's remorse and never send that earnest money. And I've seen that happen so many times. So 5 days is a good days to put in there. Now, if they're local, I put 3 days. Because, you're buying a house, you need to get in your car and bring me that earnest money if they're local. Even if we do it over dot loop, which I do all the time, you need to get in your car and bring me that earnest money. And then this name of the holder and the address of the holder, that is required by statute, that we put in the contract who's going to hold the earnest money and where they're located at. Then, of course, how much is here. And that's up to the buyer what they want to put. You may have to have a conversation with them, because if they're going to be in a multiple offer situation, sometimes more earnest money makes it more appealing to the seller. So those are conversations you have to have, and they're going to pay by check or however, okay, money order, but don't take cash. Now, name of holder, that has become a bone of contention because there are companies out there. Let me just tell you what I think about them, and you've probably learned this about me. I'll just tell you what I think most of the time. I think it is lazy brokers that don't want to hold earnest money, because the real estate commission gives you two choices when you're going to be a broker and have a firm. You can either have an account or not have an account, and I'm talking an escrow account. You can apply for a waiver and not have one. So if you apply for a waiver and you don't have an escrow account, then that must mean you're okay with the other firm always holding the earnest money, right? But they're not. They want you to take it to a title company. You're seeing that everywhere now. So you need to understand that a title company is not bound by the same rules of the real estate commission as we are when it comes to earnest money. Okay? So they don't have to disperse it in a timely manner and things like that. So if by chance, of course, here's what I'm going to tell you. I always put Weichert in there. I don't care what it says in the MLS that somebody needs to hold the earnest money. I always put Weichert in there. I always put your office in there and your office address. Okay? We're not afraid to hold earnest money at Weichert. We're not afraid to do that. It's okay. So, but if somebody sends you an offer and it's got a title company in there, then you may need to, well, let me go backwards. We'll talk about that in a minute. I've got stuff on here that I want to talk to you about. If it's got a title company in there, you need to use another form, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute. So when we're talking about earnest money, I have this question to ask you. According to the purchase and sale agreement or TREC, you must make a copy of any earnest trust money check you receive and email it to the cooperating agent. Yes or no? The answer to that's no. They don't require that. That is not a requirement. It is not anywhere in the purchase and sale agreement, and it's not anywhere in the Real Estate Commission's rules that we make a copy of this check. As a matter of fact, most attorneys of large real estate firms will say, do not keep copies of earnest money checks in your file. Now, why in the world would they say that? Because, we love making copies of them and putting them in our email, by the way, our unencrypted email, and sending them out across to everybody. Well, what you got to think of, oops, I can't run this thing today. What you got to think of here in the state of Tennessee is what is the identity theft laws and the fraud laws when you have a copy of what they call a person's personal information. Sometimes it's called personal identifiable information. There's laws about how you have to handle that information. So anytime you have a person's first name or first initial and last name in combination with any one of these other things that you see listed here, then that's when you have to abide by the laws under the identity theft and such in the state of Tennessee. So when we have somebody's earnest money check that has their name on it and their account number on it, then we have to abide by those laws all the time. Now, I don't have time to go into all these laws, but I will tell you what it says. Number one, if it's compromised, and you have to understand what compromise means. If someone other than you sees it, it's compromised. Okay? So if you send a copy of that check to another agent, you have compromised your buyer's personal identifiable information, and you're supposed to file a police report and let the buyer know that you have compromised their bank account. That's what the law says. Okay? So I don't know where it all started that we were sending copies of checks, but they've done it for 50 years at least. I know they've done it for the 25 years I've been in Tennessee. Okay?
How do you get around that then?
We stopped making copies of it. But see, that's a broker's call. Okay? That's a broker's call of whether we make copies of it or not. Now, can we make a copy of it and put it in our own system? Sure, but then we've got to be responsible for it. So when you are talking about how do you get around it in the transaction, just don't send it. And tell them that your office policy is you don't send somebody's check through email because we don't have encrypted emails. Now, I can only speak to what I've done for the last 8 years, and you guys know I was with Crylike, and our corporate attorney said absolutely not. Quit making copies of them. Quit shooting them through email. Now, listen, I know there's Crylike agents out there that do it because everybody does what they want to do. But the attorney sent out a message to every agent and said, do not do this anymore. Okay? And I just started saying, it's our company policy that we don't share copies of checks. And nobody said anything. They're okay. It's not a big deal. Now, if you need me to verify it's been deposited, I can do that. I can send you an email that says, hey, the earnest money check was deposited on February the 18th into the Weichert's bank account. I don't care to send you that. That way you got something in writing that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy. Okay? I don't care to do that. I will do that for you, but I'm not going to send you a copy of an earnest money check. So just be careful and understand what's going on out there. And I'd like to think that Dotloop is secure enough that maybe people can't get in there to hack in there. And that's actually a pipe dream. They can hack into anything they want to hack into. But at least, putting them in there is like locking them in our filing cabinet, basically, I think, if we have a copy of it. But let's stop sending them out everywhere. Because that is when, think about this for a second. If you have a check, one of your own personal checks that's currently in your purse or your wallet, just go ahead and fill it out for $500 and email me a copy of it. And so the thing is, anybody can take that routing number and account number and get into somebody's bank account. That's all they need. That's all they need to buy stuff. That's all they need. So just think about it and put yourself in your buyer's shoes, okay? I'm not telling you not to get earnest money. Lord, get as much as you can, okay? What I'm telling you is be careful with what you get. All right? So that's what that's all about. Here's what I wanted to tell you about if a title company is going to hold earnest money. And I would give you this form number, but I've totally went blank. Hold on just a second, and I will tell you what it is. It is RF482. I'll just pull it up here on the screen, the form itself, and not be in the PowerPoint. Can you guys see the form? Okay, so this is the escrow agreement. So if somebody insists that title company or a title company holds earnest money, you need to use this form. And you're going to fill out the date. You're going to say who the escrow agent is, and that is the title company's name. You're going to put the buyer's name, the seller's name. And then you're going to come down here and you're going to have to start filling stuff out. Escrow agent hereby acknowledges receipt of the following: the sum of such by cash, check, or draft. The check or draft, if any, is payable endorsed to escrow agent dated this date, drawn on this bank by somebody, the buyer's name. Okay? And then they can hold documents for you too, but we're talking about earnest money right now. Such funds and/or documents are for the following purposes: earnest money for the purchase of 123 Elm Street, whatever. Escrow agent shall release said funds and/or documents upon the occurrence of the following: closing of 123 Elm Street, okay? Escrow agent shall be notified in writing by somebody upon the satisfactory completion of the items or conditions stipulated in Section 3 above. Upon notification, escrow agent will release said fund document within 3 business days. Of course, they're going to do it all at closing. And you may need to put here, if you've not been through the home inspection process, you may need to put upon the occurrence of the closing or termination of the contract on such and such property, okay? And they're going to release the funds or documents to themselves because you're going to put the title company's name there. And then down here, on completion of the disbursement of funds and delivery of instruments, escrow agent shall be released and discharged of its escrow obligations hereunder. This agreement may be canceled in either of the following manners: and mutual agreement by all parties in writing, or the agent, escrow agent, title company, may resign as the person holding the funds, okay? And they're going to release these funds to who? And I know this is a lot of information, but this is the things the attorneys say has to be in place for a title company to hold earnest money. Escrow agent shall receive as compensation for the services to be rendered by the escrow agent hereunder the sum of, you're going to have to put some money in here. I would put $50. And I would put in here that the seller, I put the seller's name, is going to pay that $50 when they release those funds, because the seller and their agent are the ones saying it's got to be held at the title company. Do you see what I'm saying? So they get to pay for the title company to handle that earnest money. The buyer's not going to pay for that. And then there's a bunch of legal stuff down here. And then here's the most fun part ever, is the fact that the buyer, the seller, and the title company have to sign saying we're going to hold these funds and we're going to disperse them the way we're supposed to disperse them. Because again, a title company is not under the same rules that we are and laws that we are concerning earnest money and at TREC. Okay? So I had this stuff on things here. Any questions about that at all? It's a lot of work to have a title company to hold earnest money. So just let Weichert hold it. If you get an offer where a title company is going to be holding earnest money and you're going to counteroffer it for other things, why not just counteroffer that Weichert will hold the earnest money also? Okay? It's just better if the real estate firm holds it. But you do have offices out there that they don't want to hold earnest money. All right, we're just about to finish up here. If you fail to receive the earnest money, so whoever the holder is has to notify everybody that the buyer has not brought the earnest money. And there's places on the notification form, the RF 656 notification form. So if it's Weichert and we're holding the earnest money, and we do that most of the time when we represent a buyer, right? Then we have to let everybody know that we haven't received the earnest money. Now, here's the funky up part about this that the Forms Committee's done, and I've asked them to change it, and they won't, because Middle Tennessee and Nashville, who they think is, the gods of real estate, over there, the listing office holds the earnest money. The buyer's office does not hold the earnest money. So they have put these items under the seller's notification to the buyer on the notification form. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the holder stuff is under the seller when across the state it's done differently, and it's absolutely negotiable on who holds it in the purchase and sale agreement. So if you don't get it, if we're Weichert and we're supposed to get it and we don't get it, I'm going to tell you what I think we need to do is that we need to go to the notification form and we need to copy this language at number 28 here, and we need to send it in an email because it does say, it just says we have to promptly notify. It doesn't say how, but we want to do it in writing, right? And email is one of the ways we can deliver notification in the purchase and sale agreement. Okay, so I think that we should go in here and we should let everybody know that we haven't received it or it's been dishonored. Okay, so, in other words, the check bounces. We got to let everybody know that. And then once we've let everybody know that, the buyer then has 1 day to deliver immediately available funds to the holder of earnest money. And if they don't, then the seller has the right to terminate the agreement at that point in time. So, but if they bring it in a good, check or a cashier's check or money order, that's immediately available funds, then everything's good. All right. So it's a little wonky there because they've written this form up for the way they do it in what they consider to be the largest real estate market in the state, which is Middle Tennessee. And so us over here, we just kind of have to make it up as we go kind of stuff. All right. Handling the earnest money. Once you receive it, now the law used to say it had to be deposited within so many days. Well, they changed the law, okay? And the law now says it has to be deposited promptly after the binding agreement date. Now, somebody always asks me, well, what does promptly mean? Look it up in the dictionary. It means what it means in the dictionary. Or the agreed upon delivery date in this earnest money, trust money section, or as specified in special stipulation section contained herein. So, promptly. Here, this happened to me 3 weeks ago. You guys all know I had COVID, right? And I had earnest money. I had a buyer drop off earnest money to the Cleveland office that I went by and picked up and then got COVID. And I had it in my possession. I sent it to his office. It was actually with me at home. And I couldn't do anything with it until I got better because I didn't want to come in down here and deposit it and touch stuff and be around because of COVID. So I think that the Real Estate Commission, if that's ever looked at, they will take that into consideration. And I promptly deposited it as soon as I came back to work. Okay? And then it says that the holder shall disperse the earnest money only as follows. This is straight out of the statute. Straight out of the statute. It has to be. That's the way it is. We do have a form to file an interpleader. If they're going to argue over earnest money, then the best thing to do is interplead it, in my opinion. It does say in here that upon a reasonable interpretation of the agreement, if it's clearly cut in the purchase and sale agreement where it says, let's say, if the buyer can't get financing and they have a loan denial letter, they get their earnest money back. As a broker, I'll make that reasonable interpretation. If it's a reasonable interpretation, like in the home inspection paragraph where the sellers agreed to let the buyer terminate, termination is one of their options, and it says if they terminate, they get their earnest money back, that's a reasonable interpretation of the contract. I'm going to do that. But if for some reason they're arguing over earnest money, like maybe they didn't close on time, okay, and neither person would sign an extension, okay, that might need to be an interpleader. So we have a form for that in the Tennessee Bank of Forms. However, you're going to need an attorney to do that. An attorney's going to have to file that, and if it is, and the holder pays any funds to get this interpleaded out, then the holder gets reimbursed for and can deduct out of that earnest money their fees and their costs and reasonable attorney fees and such as that. And it says the prevailing party in the interpleader action shall be entitled to collect from the other party the costs and expenses reimbursed to holder. So it's going to come out of the earnest money, but then whoever prevails, buyer or seller, then the other person has to pay that money that it cost them. All right? And then here's an important sentence. Earnest money or trust money shall not be dispersed prior to 14 days after deposit unless written evidence of clearance by bank is provided. And we really get into that mostly only in cash deals when they're going to close in like 10 days or a week or whatever. if they give you an earnest money check of any kind, then you have to make sure and get an email from the bank or something that says it has cleared the bank. Okay? Remember, when it comes to earnest money and trust money, the question is, what do the numbers 14 and 21 have to do with it? Well, I just told you about the 14-day thing, and 21 days is what the law says that once we receive a written request for earnest money, then the firm only has 21 calendar days, so they count Saturdays and Sundays, to disperse the earnest money. So anytime the buyers and sellers have agreed in their purchase and sale agreement that any time that it says that they can refund the buyer's earnest money, they're going to get it back. So when you get this notification form and anywhere box that's checked, like right here, the appraisal value didn't equal or exceed, the buyer's terminating and hereby request refund of earnest money or trust money, if you get that box is checked and the buyer has signed it, then the firm has 21 calendar days from the date it's signed to reimburse them their earnest money. So anywhere it says this is a written request for earnest money when you get this in writing. And so for these items here, this is where as a broker I would feel comfortable making that reasonable interpretation, because it's the buyer and seller have agreed to that in the purchase and sale agreement, that if this happens, the buyer gets their earnest money back. So I'll just give it back to them. Okay, so there's the appraised value didn't equal or exceed. They can't get the loan. Let's see what else is down through here. Material defects on the title couldn't be fixed, and they're terminating because of the home inspection. And we need to remember, on that termination for home inspection, the buyer and seller are agreeing that that buyer can terminate for any reason as long as it is not cosmetic or bringing it up to building codes, or they just changed their mind that they're backing out, because they have to list on this form why they're terminating. Not because of the home inspection. It has to be a specific reason, because the sink in the kitchen is leaking, or because the deck has broken railing. I mean, whatever. It can be anything. That's what they're agreeing to. Okay? All right. Questions? Any questions? Wow, I got it done in right about an hour. Cool. All right, guys, we're going to get through this, and I've put some other things on the calendar coming up in March, some things that we've talked about when we've been doing this on Friday. The March calendar is already in SEM Tools, and you can see, I think, we already did multiple offers. I think I have the buyer's first right of refusal, the VA form, and some other forms coming up in March. But if you can think of anything else that you want to talk about, just let me know, because we'll do it. Okay? All right. Now go sell some real estate.
Have a good day.
There's a comment. There's a comment up here. I didn't see the chat. I'm sorry. Did you guys have somebody have a chat? I don't see it.
Tim just made a comment.
Oh.
He said, good story.
Oh, okay. Hey, where is he? All right. I'll see
He's
you
here.
guys. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Have a good one.
Yeah, bye. Good morning.